Hello, good peoples. It is a snowy, sort of blustery December evening. And I've been thinking a lot. I have some thoughts. And, that's what this sort of place is for me. It's a chance to get some ideas out there, throw some ideas out there, let them sort of ricochet to the degree that they do. And on this one's, I think, is a little more personal. And I want to sort of grab a hold of that word and hold on to it for a second. I was reminded the other day when I was thinking about what I want to say, how I wanted to say it, some of these things can be difficult, is that I thought of a guy named James Burke, who was the science correspondent for the BBC for many years. He was also an amazing historian, really a historian of science. And he did some long form programs, a series of 10 or so many episodes. He did a number of them, and they were frankly fantastic. But wonderful thing about diving into history a little bit is you come to realize it's more than just about a fact here or a fact there. We've got facts, but you need the historian to give it some context. What lesson are we learning from this? What could people have done? What should people have done? And that depends. Now it gets into a subjective realm, and right. So even history, where we hopefully have a grasp of what took place, understanding what that is and was, and what that necessarily means in its time and in this time, right? That takes some it takes some thinking, and there is never going to be an exact answer because history changes, right? History is constantly being reinterpreted depending upon where the culture has gone at any particular time. With that in mind, thinking of Burke used to start his program. I remember one in particular, the day the universe changed, and after the credits and all of that happened, and he was about to be very sciencey and get very much into fact. The last thing that you saw on the screen before he starts speaking and gave you a great hour, it said a personal view. And I always thought that was fantastic because he was perfectly willing at the outset to say, I may have some very strong feelings. I think these things are true. I intend to prove to you that they are in fact true, right? I'm gonna make my proofs. I'm gonna make my argument. But in the end, this is the way I see it, and it obviously doesn't have to be the way anybody else does. It's a personal view. Events of the past month or so, right, and the aftermath of that, and how we react. And some of that for me comes under the heading of a personal view. And with the idea that no matter what you say here, someone is going to think you're the Antichrist. It's almost certain, right? So you can affirm nothing, especially on the internet in this day and age, because there are plenty of ideas that just are, well, you can't be an ardent capitalist and an ardent communist, right? There are mutually exclusive ideas, and and there are sides, and we take them, and instead of trying to please everybody, which is impossible, which is probably part of what our issues are these days, anyhow, it may be a good and perfectly fine thing to say, yes, I have a view with which you may disagree violently, and I don't really care. I've come to these views, I think, in a reasonable way. I think I have thought things through, and I have it. So all of that is percolating in my brain here. So I could say, look at where we are, and how do you respond to it? And I think that depends somewhat on where you are in your life. I'm going to speak for me. I've been watching politics since I was 10. I was a precocious kid, and I remember watching the both the Republican and the Democrats do their conventions when I was 10 years old. I watched every night of both of them. I want to get both points of view. I want to understand that. I always love news, all this stuff. So I love papers, loved papers. There was a certain romance to all of that. I got into stuff like that. So what I've seen throughout my life, where I am at now, I'm not an old person. It's not all over. He was a kind man. He was a wise man. He was a quiet man. No. We're not doing that. But I'm also not a kid. I'm in another place, and I'm watching this, and I'm disgusted. But I'm not surprised. I'm not in any way shocked. I've been watching this slow motion train wreck my whole life. I remember as growing up, the folks then saying, you know, I don't like the way things are headed. Now, you say, well, everybody sees that, and everybody always says that, and then everything's fine. And sometimes things aren't fine. Hey? My elders talking way back in the day, seeing standards being lowered in business and education all across the culture. The dumbing down of America, right? They weren't wrong. It was all happening. Journalistic standards say all of it. The only thing that matters is making bread. The only thing that matters is we don't care about anything else. The only thing matters is that shareholders, you know, make their money. I mean, again and again and again, watching all those standards just disappear. Truth doesn't matter. Everything's just a matter of opinion. There is no real. And now this is accelerated in the past 8 years or so, right? But it was coming on for a long time. And one of my reactions recently has been to maybe this is because I thought of James Burke. I started thinking of history and periods of time in which it was leading to a cataclysm, and how people either knew the cataclysm was coming but didn't want to make any waves, or did the failure of sometimes 20 and 30 years, 12 years, 50, whatever it was, that led to some moment, all of which was probably unnecessary. I thought of a couple scenarios like this where you could see it coming. And nobody wanted to deal with it. There was a complete abdication of responsibility. My favorite one, I think, was the three presidents leading up to Lincoln. We're talking Fillmore, Pierce, and Buchanan. They were all terrible. But they all thought, let's not make waves. They were not going to confront the obvious problems, right? They were not going to touch slavery. They were going to try to appease the South and just keep this going, I guess. And they thought that was good management, and they thought that was good stewardship. Pierce, for instance, is fascinating. He really just wanted the abolitionists to just stop talking, and found the abolitionists to be obviously extremists. When you think about that, right? The abolition of slavery, something, you know. And there were people then going, this needs to happen tomorrow. This needs to happen yesterday. This should never have occurred. What's going on? They weren't wrong. Those that were the unreasonable voices were actually the only people saying something that clearly had to happen. But they really, Pierce couldn't stand the abolitionists. Here's a guy from New Hampshire who went to college at Bowdoin. Nathaniel Hawthorne was one of his buddies. I mean, these weren't dumb people. They could not. They had really no real issue with slavery. Wasn't a problem with that. Now, what's amazing also is some of these guys lived through the Civil War, and on the other side of it, were still convinced they had been right about it the whole time. Never got it, and never were going to get it. It's extraordinary. You sit there and go, okay. Then the moment comes and they learned their lesson, boy. No, they don't. They go to their grave shaking their fist that everybody else got it wrong because only they had it right. So there should be a judgment of history, right? The judgment of history should come down like a ton of bricks on those guys about, how wrong they got it. And it should be compounded by the fact that there was no contrition or no sense that it ever dawned on them. This wasn't Alec Guinness at the end of Bridge on the River Kwai saying, "What have I done?" It's not that. They never get it. And they enabled it. They enabled all of it that led to that moment. They made it happen rather than tamped it down. Because they were essentially weak. And maybe just not bright enough to see it. Now, in our current situation, obviously there is you don't blame the victims here, right? I get that, it's in the Civil War. South were the bad guys. Yeah. Got it. I didn't need any help on that one. I'm aware of that. But if the fighting had happened, not the fighting, but if this had been pushed back against harder right off the bat, much more so, from the 1840s on, if there was a major movement going, enough, we might never had the Civil War. I think it's possible. Get into contrafactuals. It's fascinating. But the point is that they didn't. And all of that, I think, made it more likely, greased the skids, made it seem certainly to the South that, hey, they're not fighting back, let's go. And it reminds me, there's a corollary here. I know who the bad guys now are too, okay? But I also see the Democrats that have failed us. They have failed as stewards of democracy. They are so enamored with being rule followers that they seem to forget that there are times, look, when all the rules are already broken. When all the rules are already broken, and you keep following the rules, which now are essentially don't exist, right? I mean, if you, the rule of law has died. There is no rule of law if you won't enforce it. Then there is no law. There's only what you enforce. What you enforce establishes. Okay, we have this set of rules because it's enforced. If you don't enforce it, there's no law. We have opponents that will wield power to the nth degree. But our own guys wouldn't dream of doing so, would be not sure, unsteady, not really. The only way this was going to work out the past 4 years with Biden was from the get-go, boy, you better be going hammer or tongs against this cancer that you have in the country. You've got to be fighting this every which way that you can. And they didn't do it. No, we're just going to make believe none of that happens. The Merrick Garlands. Look, Chuck Schumer. The response afterwards too. If I have to hear Cory Booker, well, we're all gonna be moral people. I mean, Cory, are you gonna fight? Are you gonna do anything? Enough. We're gonna defeat them through moral purity. Oh, that's good, because that's been working really well so far. I don't want to hear a lot about the rule following from these guys at this point. Rules are gone. Now what are you going to do? And they don't have the stomach for it, and they never did. And these are generations of Democrats, and I'm not a Democrat. And you say, well, you're so to the left. Why aren't you a Democrat? Really, because of this. They've never fought hard enough. Never fought hard enough for me. So I couldn't join them. I'll vote with them, because voting is it isn't about your own personal purity test and who do you like. This is about, there are bigger issues, bigger than yourself and bigger than self-interest, what's right for the country, where things philosophically should be headed, and that's what you're voting on, or should be, right? That should be the way you're thinking of this. We have a country right now, well, eggs went up. Okay, so I am throwing my hands up in the air going, you've done it to yourself, guys. Now there are people saying, we can get together now. Now is the time to organize. No, you just missed it. It just happened. And you didn't vote. And we couldn't get our own guys to vote. Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, $1 billion, unbelievable sums were spent, and they didn't want to do it. And they didn't want to do it because I guess they just don't really like you all that much. So that whole degree of Democratdom is now going to, I don't know if it is going to, maybe they're going to hang on and think that they're still, amazing. But that crowd should go away, whether it's Nancy or, Obama as well, Biden, the whole crowd. Guess what, guys? You sat around and watched it happen, and through your inaction allowed it to, because you never fought hard enough. And fighting means fighting on the cultural level and on the street level. And the Democrats, we're above such things. And so they've ceded the field. And they've allowed themselves to just simply not be there, to not be part of the conversation. Look, there's unbelievable nationalism in this country. And so the Democrats, rather than saying, gee, nationalism is a problem, you should be fighting that, wouldn't dream to say, that's unpopular, we can't say that. So we got to, who knows what they're talking about. It would be better to just say, we oppose nationalism. Strikes me as, look, again, I'm on the outside of all this. I'm not, people say, well, what are you going to do, Dave? Well, I'm outside the mainstream by a large margin, and I know that. I always have been. All right, hold on just a second. There's a kitty cat knocking on my door. I don't know if you can hear it. I can hear it. Hold on. Hold the thought. Let's see if we can find a kitty cat. Okay, folks, here is the source of our problems. This is S'mores. She is a great kitty, but she's a shy little bean. There she goes. That's why there was a knocking on the door. She's decided it's time to come down and hang. All right. So, on some level, I am throwing up my hands in the air because I am saying, hey, this is what you did to yourselves. And you say, well, let's get organized, and again, way too late for that. Look, I am perfectly willing to get into the fight. When there's a fight to be had, right now, good luck. I'm not completely on a news moratorium, but I'm generally in a news moratorium. It's going to play itself out. I have told myself I'm going to outlive these creeps. That is going to be. What's your philosophy, Dave? My philosophy is I'm going to take the Leonard Bernstein advice. Bernstein was, I believe, there was some terrible act of violence, and they said, what is going to be your response to this? And Leonard Bernstein said, our response will be to make more beautiful music, and we will rededicate ourselves to our craft. It's a long quote. You could find it. Fine. I'm paraphrasing. I know I'm paraphrasing. But what I'm going to do. His response wasn't, I'm going to go join a protest march, I'm going to write better music. Like I said before, I am not part of, I recognize, I'm not going to be the one who's going to change people's minds. Did you go out and canvass? I know people who went out and canvassed. A lot of good that did too. Changed nothing. So these are much bigger forces. There's a lot of this individual, what did you do to be morally pure? It's not about moral purity, guys. We've got to get out of that thing. Well, we can't do this. Only they break the rules. We would never do that. Then you've already lost. Until you push back, and until our side of things is willing to push back as hard as they're pushing, and they're pushing hard, until we're pushing as hard or harder, you don't win. Which means before you can even do that, you've got to be able to convince an enormous amount of people who do not believe a lot of things. Again, that Democratic Party as it is can implode and go away. There can be a whole new leftism. That would be great, assuming it can have some kind of unity. It could be very powerful because then it would seem like a new idea. So you could do that. And I await that eagerly, should it have a clue. But it's going to take something very new. And I don't think the future looks great at all. But what are you going to do? What can you... Well, there isn't a heck of a lot of response for most of us to even have at this point. Games, it's a jig's up. It's done. That's why I think of my Bernstein quote. I will go write music. That's what I do. I'll try to put something out there that, in my own way, does what I can do. That's all I've got. I will do what I can. Now, again, if there was something politically to be involved, okay, great. But I think a lot of people are going to get hurt, and a lot of people are in a lot of trouble, and it's all unnecessary. And I do blame, I blame the legal profession for not stepping up, not being able to recognize the gravity of the situation, instead saying no, we're going to make believe it's business as usual, because we don't want to set off the wrong tone. Right. How are all those decisions looking now? Merrick Garland, the hiring of Merrick Garland, the electing Biden, It wasn't terrible, but good God, it was not up to the moment. They had 4 years to get this stuff done. They sat around for a year and a half, couldn't figure out what to do. Sat on their hands, and Trump ran out the clock. They've richly deserved what's coming at this point. And it's terrible. It's going to be bad news. I am lucky that no one can say, well, I don't have anything to worry about. I've got enough money put away and I can survive this. No, there's nobody who can really say that. But if you're really poor, it's going to be bad out there. And if you're well off enough to shield yourself from some things, you might survive it better than others. Again, I do sort of throw my hands up in the air. I'm not watching a ton of news, and I'm like, because I don't think there's us obsessing about the daily outrage doesn't change it. I don't need to be reminded. I don't need the lesson to be taught to me for the 10,000th time. There's clearly younger people in this world who've never experienced anything like this. Now, nobody's really has, but more or less, we've seen corruption. We've seen that. We know, okay, those of us who've been around a bit got a pretty good handle. But there's a whole new generation that has to decide for themselves what kind of world they want to live in, and didn't figure it out this time. Not bright enough, I guess. So we'll see. I'm keeping my head down. I'm going to do that which I can do, which was true before. Truth being, other than our vote, we could speak out. Not that affects much. We could do, we do everything that we can do, but that's not, look, again, unbelievable sums were spent on this election and it moved nothing. There are larger societal forces at work here than anything any one of us is going to do. Events are going to play out, and they are out of control. And it is an indictment really on, on this world and the way it's run. If you study history, you know it, right? Have we ever really run this whole shooting match really all particularly that well? No, people tried to keep an out of control thing somehow still on the track and didn't totally implode. And every now and then there's a big implosion and then things rearrange. And we have not been running this particularly great. And it's pretty obvious we're not capable of it. If we were capable of it, we wouldn't be in this situation. So what is the individual going to do about that? Because I really don't like that, go, well, it's you, that's your responsibility. And if you, bull. No one of us has this great power to change it all. We're passengers. And when we get a chance and we vote, okay, all right, right. But those are our moments. That's for them. You can volunteer, you can get involved, but you can volunteer if it makes you feel better. Okay, but the three of us went and joined the group, and we passed out. Great. What materially changed is that? Probably nothing. But you felt better. Oh, okay. If that's the case, and you're not going to do any damn good, and you're not going to change it, and I'm looking at myself right now going, they're not going to listen to me. Look, I'm a musician, and even amongst that, I'm a minority within a minority, because you could slice musician to a million different ideas. And my idea of what is exciting and interesting, most people have no interest in it whatsoever. I do not have a huge amount of people out there who understand, yes, who look at it just like I do. I'm alone. I'm a humanist. I abhor nationalism, and I am basically an opponent of religion. We have God and country, right? And I'm like, both are trouble. Both are wrong. Got that wrong? Okay. And those are, bedrock beliefs for... What, I'm going to fix that? No, I'm not going to fix any of that. I can oppose it. And what I think, we've got to get them on our side. We have to talk to them. And no, you're not. You got to fight. You got to fight. You got to fight hard. And our guys, no, we believe pacifism is the way. Great. It's worked out great so far. It's really gone well. Yeah. I mean, there's no way when look, elected Tricky Dick twice, George W. Bush twice. Now this guy again, one of the great crooks of all time. You need to be fighting a lot harder. Those should be possible that those people get elected. That's a failed society. It's a failed culture. And I'm not sure it deserves our best efforts. I'd like to see something that gives me a reason to. And again, I'd be thrilled if it did happen. And I think it probably eventually will, but it's my goal to outlive these times intact, come out the other end and go, oh my God, what a freaking disaster. And people say, wow, but I always felt this way. All this has done is made me sort of recalibrate and go, wait a minute, you knew this from kindergarten. I'm part of mainstream society. I'm never have been, so I'm fine with it. I'm totally good with where I'm at. But considering what a mess mainstream society is, it's actually kind of a compliment. I feel pretty good about it. But I can't fix it. And I will be, I'll be smart, hopefully, careful, not too careful. And it should the time come where we can seriously fight back against this sort of stuff, well, great. More and more people start to get it for the right reasons. We start to lift up our level of education. And if we can't get that because we've gotten rid of that federal department, hopefully people will enforce standards upon one another, have a renewed interest in history and what's going on, and turn it around and make the changes. And when the hard time comes for the hard political fights, not play polite at all. Realize, what you're up against. They're not going to play nice. What the hell are you playing nice for? What is wrong? Time to go toe to toe. Go hard. And without remorse. There shouldn't be any of that. And if there is, you shouldn't be involved in any of this. You should just, but our guys have been that crowd, the remorseful ones, for way too long. And they've proven they're not suited. They blew it. You could say the American people blew it, and they did, but they blew it after that first crowd, who was in a position of leadership, didn't lead. You go, well, wait a minute, Dave. It's not the Democrats are the enemy. Yeah, I get it, but there was a chance to respond. There are going to be challenges. You got to respond to it. The challenge came, and they weren't up for it. No, I'm not sure. There's too much of. Look, we're living in a time where integrity just simply doesn't exist, and in some circles, it's even encouraged that it shouldn't exist. But no, it was never. There was heavy lifting to do. People wanted all the perks, but didn't want to actually do the work. There's just a ton of that. Whether we're seeing that throughout legaldom, couldn't bring themselves, right? Well, you dashed it. You threw it all away. You just couldn't bring yourself to do the job. I can't fix it, but I can observe it. I can see it. I can keep my eyes open and hope that, there is enough people. There really are enough people to say, okay, this is screwed. We want something better. But when the time comes, and let's say there's a time when leftism is ascendant, has won something again, or is in charge of something again, better go hard. These are the only opportunities you get. And the lessons that people are going to learn in the next couple of years, I'm sure will be lost in 8 or 10 years, which is ridiculous. We should have learned something after what a waste of time 2017 was, and people are sitting going, now's the time to organize. Guys, no, that it's flown away. Anyway, those are my thoughts today. So it's depressing. I'm sorry. But I say, if you're a creative person, the great world, we're not going to fix the great world. We like to think there's a higher calling. I say that as a deep atheist. But we have a thing that we have to do. We should stay on that path. Because the world, that out of control disaster, wake me up when it's time. I'm perfectly happy to be, but not right now. This is not it does me no good. It only makes me ill to pay attention to that. Time to get my head down. I got to go work on some music. All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon. If you have any thoughts, feel free. I get it if you think I'm a bad guy. I'll survive it.